welcome back to Washington Commanders Insider. Today, we're doing a free agency / trade update around a couple players that have been linked to the Washington Commanders. We're also going to be looking at some NFL draft prospects. We're going to be looking at an edge rusher that I think certainly could help the Washington Commanders, along with a wide receiver prospect that might be a day one starter if he's available to the Washington Commanders here via draft. And so before we go ahead and jump into the content for today, I first wanted to remind you to go out there and go ahead and hit that subscribe button, just like Jaden Daniels hits Terry McLaurin in stride with a nice pass down the field. And in exchange for that subscribe, we're going to continue to give you nothing but Washington Commanders content daily. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into this free agency update and looking at a couple players that have been linked to the Washington Commanders, and starting with Azeez Ojulari. And so it looks like that he has officially signed with the Philadelphia Eagles. I was seeing that I believe it's a 1-year deal. And I would say that he's been linked to the Washington Commanders. I've been seeing some, articles out there that suggest maybe the Washington Commanders might want to sign him. He is a defensive end. And so that is definitely, I think, a need for the Washington Commanders. And so when you look at the Giants season last year, it was definitely a tough season. But one of the things that he's done well is he's had the ability to get sacks. In fact, he had 6 this last season. He had 8 in his rookie year. And I know it's been tough over there for the Giants, but look, he did have 5.5 stuffs. So he had 5.5, I believe, run stuffs. And that is something that I think the Washington Commanders certainly could use, a player that can come up and definitely, just plug up the run, because that is one of the things that we really struggled with in this last season. And so, it's tough to see he's heading over to a division rival. But, this is a player that I think was linked to the Washington Commanders, but they miss out here as he's heading over to the Philadelphia Eagles. And so next, another player that has been linked to the Washington Commanders and maybe really a couple of other teams, and this is via trade. And so we have an update here around now Trey Hendrickson. And so this is something that is pretty much everywhere, but this is on CBS Sports where I saw this, and it's saying that the Bengals are working to retain Trey Hendrickson after giving an extension over here to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, so taking care of them. And so, with the Bengals situation, obviously now that they've got them signed, depending on how the money is moved and things like that, it looks like that they probably have some space here. And I'm just saying to myself, like, I'm not really surprised that, this report has come out. And I think that when you see this, it really suggests that I'm just not sure that Trey Hendrickson's going anywhere. I think that there's been several players, or not players, but teams that have inquired about him. And I think just from the start, Trey Hendrickson, look, he wants to stay there. It sounds like he really does want to stay. And it also sounds like that Joe Burrow is interested in keeping players there that have helped them get to the Super Bowl. And so it looks like that they want to continue to try to run it back. And that certainly means that you go and you keep Trey Hendrickson. And so, if they're looking to go ahead and extend him now that they've moved some money around with these deals, I think it makes a lot of sense, because I think that if the Bengals wanted to make a deal, I think certainly they could have made a deal. And, I just think that Trey Hendrickson is just, as time goes along and then it just stays quiet on that front, I think that they're quietly probably working to getting him extended out there. But it's going to be interesting to see what they do as far as, the terms of the deal, how much guaranteed money's on the table, and also to how many years they go ahead and extend Trey Hendrickson out. But I think that he's a player that the Washington Commanders are going to probably be out on, but we'll see what happens. And we'll definitely let you know as updates continue to go. And so with that being said, with the Washington Commanders being out here, maybe on Trey Hendrickson, and certainly being out on Azeez Ojulari, I think that they can now focus a bit more on the NFL draft. And so starting with a defensive player that I think the Washington Commanders could get, I think that this is a player that maybe he's going to be a little bit of a project, but I also think that he could maybe make an immediate impact from day one, just because of how natural he is. And so that is Mike Green out of Marshall. And so I've been looking at a couple mock drafts, and Mike Green has been projected to maybe fall to the Washington Commanders. And so, look, when I looked at his tape, I mean, I just see a guy that is a natural pass rusher. I mean, it just looks like he has the it factor, and he is super fluid. I mean, it's just, there's no wasted motion as he's rushing the passer, and he gets home with a purpose. And so he's super fluid. That's number one. And number two, look, he is hard to figure out. I think that trying to block him is like playing a game of chess out there, because he can hit you with several different moves. And so that is another thing that you love about Mike Green. I think that he comes in with a deep bag as far as just being able to get to the quarterback. And I think that that's a real plus, because I think that there's a lot of players that have basic moves and then they have to learn a little bit more when they get to the NFL. No, this guy has several different moves that he can get you with. And then next, another thing that I love about him is just his agility. Like, I think that that was one of the things that just really pops off the tape, because there's several times where he's kind of like knocked off balance, but he's able to quickly regain his balance and then use that momentum to get back into the play to either get to the ball carrier or get the sack. And so I thought that that was incredible. Did some more research with him, and this was on NFL Draft Buzz. And so it looks like that he actually was a wrestler, I believe, in high school. And so that kind of explains how he's able to kind of get his balance. He wins the hand fight, so to speak. So whenever you have like an offensive lineman or a tight end or whoever's coming to block him, it seems like that he's able to use their balance against them and get to the ball carrier or the quarterback. And so I thought that that just really pops when you look at the tape. And then he's like very athletic, because he started off as a linebacker. I think he went to the University of Virginia there. And even in high school, he was actually a very good wide receiver. And so he's got the wide receiver base in high school. He was a linebacker, he took a year off, and then he went to Marshall, and he just really took off. And so some of his stats here and what he was able to do at Marshall, look, he went from 4 total tackles in 2021 with the University of Virginia, got to Marshall in 2023. He had 43 total tackles. He had 81 in 2024. But the sacks are really what jump off the page for you, because look, he had 1 sack in 2021, 4.5 in 2023, and then he had 17 sacks in 2024. Like, he became a sack artist. And so he also, too, is very good at forcing fumbles. He had 3 forced fumbles in 2024. And so his production actually went up. He didn't get a forced fumble in his first year, got 1 in his next season, and then got 3. And so I think that that's always huge when you can create another possession for your offense. And so Mike Green, look, he reminds me a lot of a Khalil Mack or like a JJ Watt. Like, that's exactly the type of player type that I'm looking at with him. Now, some of the things that they say is a weakness for him is maybe his ability to come up on the run. I think that they're saying maybe at times he's a bit undisciplined and kind of gets in the air to try to make some of the tackles and things like that. And they're just wondering from a strength standpoint, will he be able to hold up? He's 6'4", 248, and maybe doesn't have necessarily the length. But again, I'm just talking about the ability and just the agility. Like, he seems like a player that he's going to be able to figure it out. And I think that as long as he wants to be a good run defender, I think that he's a player that you take him on. I know it's going to be a bit of a project there, but I think that I'm banking on the fact that he can figure that out, and he can also get stronger as well. And so, Mike Green, I think if he's a player that falls to the Washington Commanders, you go get him. And he just really has a knack, too, for creating negative plays. In fact, 12 of his 13 games played, look, he accounted for at least a tackle that just led to a negative play. And so he will find a way to create negative plays for your defense as well. And so you love that about him, his ability to push the offense back. And so that is prospect number 1. I definitely think a player that the Commanders should take a chance with. And so next, look, we've talked about this before, and just maximizing this window with Jayden Daniels. We talked about it in yesterday's video, but going back to the offense and looking at a wide receiver that maybe could be an impact here on day 1. And I think it's going to be Jayden Higgins. And so Jayden Higgins, man, I think that when you turn on his tape, there's a lot to like about this young man. He did transfer into Iowa State. He played for Eastern Kentucky University, I believe 2 years, yes, in 2021. in 2022. And so immediately, the one thing that really, kind of pops off the tape, or really off the page, I should say, is that he's 6'4", 215. So he's a tall receiver, and he knows how to use his size. All right. He has terrific hands, and he has a great catch radius. And so I think there were several times on tape where it's just like the quarterback just kind of threw it into a space. He throws his arms out there and he will catch the football. And just looking at one of the things here in NFL Draft Buzz about him, look, in 129 targets, he only had 2 drops. That is very good production and lets you know that he has some sure hands. Next, I think he's terrific as far as getting loose on outs and hitches. Like, I think he does a great job there. And he also does a good job as far as running go routes. And so he will give you a window to drop the football in on those routes. And so you love that. I think that has been like kind of a staple of our offense. And so I could see him really being a good player for us there. And then what I love too is that he could maybe be a player that could turn into like a great yak player, okay? Because he fights for yards after the catch. I think there were several times where I saw on his tape, he would catch like anywhere from an 8 to a 5-yard pass, and he would turn that into, a 12, a 15-yard gain just like that, because he's able to get loose off the initial tackle. And so that was good to see. I think he's great as far as catching in traffic. And so if there's a couple bodies around, he was able to locate the football and use his size and kind of box out that way. At the NFL Combine, he ran a 4.47. He had a 39-inch, I think, vertical jump. He had a 10 feet 8 broad jump. And so 10.8 as far as his broad jump. And so one of the things that they talk about with him that could be like a weakness is just that he doesn't have a whole bunch of explosion, and he doesn't have necessarily a lot of speed. And so, he has like a little bit to get off the line, and I think he creates the windows that you want, and he'll get to the point where you can get a pocket to get it to him. But you have to understand that when you get to the NFL level, the cornerbacks are going to be a bit more physical. They're going to be a bit more quicker. And so that means that he's going to have to become a lot more technically sound. He's going to have to be able to set the corners up a little bit more. And I think that just that initial burst is something he can work on. But I just like the fact that he has the size, and I feel like he could just box players out. And if you give him an added step, which I think he can find it, look, he could be a dangerous player. And I certainly think the Washington Commanders could really take advantage of him in red zone opportunities. I could see that Jaden Daniels would be able to throw it up to him. He'll be able to throw it into tight windows, which we know Jaden Daniels can do. I think that he can make those plays. And really, with these chunk plays, if you're able to get those, I feel like that those are momentum boosters for your offense. And he plays with a lot of juice, a lot of swagger. He's going to let you know that he got the first down. So Jayden Higgins is a player that I think could immediately maybe step in and be a starter for you. And the player comparison that I get from him is a couple USC receivers. I'm thinking of Drake London, who plays for the Atlanta Falcons, and then also too Michael Pittman that plays for the Colts. That is exactly what Jayden Higgins reminds me of when I look at his tape. And so anyway, let me know in the comments here, do you think that the Washington Commanders would take a chance on a wide receiver like Jayden Higgins? Do you like edge rusher Mike Green out of Marshall? And then also too, do you think the Washington Commanders are going to trade for Trey Hendrickson? Let me know in the comments what you're thinking. And as we always say, go Commanders, and I will see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.